So we had Workstream 1, which was billed as problems with go-to-market for service innovation. Very interesting workstream, and I want to thank everybody who was there. Now, the problem is we started late, and a couple of the panelists didn't turn up, so we actually roped in Quayle from Orange into the panel, which was very useful as well. And we had a discussion largely around how telcos can, first of all, enable service innovation within their organizations, and then some of the issues of going to market. Now, we also had on the panel Alex from Nexmo and Luis from Appidays, and they were kind of bemused listening to the issues that the telcos have with taking services to market. Because, of course, the whole point of the APIs and the whole point of the kind of cloud-based communication service providers is that it's very easy to get to market. You simply expose the API, the developer writes the service, and they deploy it on an enterprise website, and it just takes the API from the telco, and that's it. So effectively, the discussion was really revolving around the problems in telco and business as usual. Now, I made some notes to try and kind of remember it and relay the topic of conversation. So first of all, from Amos, from Axiata, was saying, look, I have been dealing for 18 months with issues within the business as usual units within the operator in which he works. And I don't want to go into too much detail because we don't really want to, as it were, publicize all of these core problems. But essentially, it comes down to an abstraction of the issues. And we can see it like this. The existing telecom operators have a structural organization which is centered around a set of KPIs, which is about financial performance. And I think this was also something that was coming from the Orange side as well, is that how do you now, if you're going to encourage and build service innovation within a telecom operator, what do you need to, first of all, change within that organization? And one of the first things we focused on, and the conclusion was, we need to think again about KPIs. Because from top down, people are rewarded and encouraged to think about profit and loss, obviously, and also about achieving the KPIs which are structured around achieving that profit and loss. So if you come and you start talking about new services, they don't even move the needle. So this is a core problem within telcos as a whole. People, although on an individual level, can accept that service innovation is needed, and on an individual level, they can understand the intellectual argument that voice is commoditizing, messaging is commoditizing, and the business is falling away. When it actually comes to their day-to-day jobs that they actually do in the operator, that is another world, because their job for that year is to achieve that KPI. And therefore, it becomes very difficult to actually convince people that service innovation is going to have any impact at all, although people do appreciate the need for it. So the first problem, and we didn't come up with any answers on how we're going to solve this, but essentially, unless we get KPIs right, and unless from the top down, there's an understanding that service innovation is critical to the future of the business, it's going to be problematic. And so some of the insights that were shared were that one has to deal with lots of different colleagues in different departments, but you have to get the language right. So if we're in a paradigm shift, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Thomas Kuhn and the way that paradigms remain until the last owner of the paradigm actually dies off. If we're going to actually shift the paradigm within telco, the critical thing is you have to get the language right. You have to be able to talk to people about digital services and service innovation as strategic investments, I think was one of the key terms. So massive challenges internally, dealing with colleagues, dealing with business as usual, dealing with CFOs, dealing with C-level. However, everybody understands that service innovation is critical going forward. So these were laid out, this was the discussion, and we didn't really come up with any key solutions to that, except to say two things. One was that Luis from Happy Days has successfully worked with customers of the telcos. So if you go and work with a bank, or if you work with a hospital, or if you work with a large advertising concern, and you create a service that adds value to their business, then one of the ways in which you can convince colleagues back in the mothership that this is an interesting service is for the big bank to go say, hey, we want to have that service. And then people, as it were, buy into that. But you've still then got to go through all these different processes. So that's a key challenge that we take away from that discussion. So if you have a cloud-based communication service like Twilio or something, or even Nexmo or others, pretty easy. Just build the API, take it to market, and you're done. For the telco to take it to market, we understand the problems, everybody understands those issues, but we really didn't come up with that many conclusions on where we're going to go. Let me just check my notes to see if I've missed anything. Yeah, so I think that the final point that Alex came up to me and he said, look, all I've heard about in this discussion is that in the business as usual scenario, we need permission to innovate. And this is the problem. We need to have permission to innovate. Whereas if a developer doesn't want to have permission a developer wants to innovate. If somebody has a business problem, they create a service to solve this business problem, they don't need permission to innovate. So how do we get over this issue, and how do we get away from this need for permission to innovate? And those are kind of open questions that I think we need to engage in more debate, but at least they're actually out on the table. As they say, the first stage of therapy is actually to admit you've got a problem and get it out there on the table. Okay, so I think that winds it up. Any questions or from the panelists? Did I miss anything? Anybody want to raise any points that I missed? Otherwise, I'll hand it over. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Matt.
You're welcome.
Great. So I'll keep it short and sweet. Now, I'm just Doug's there. Good. Not yet. I'm just making sure you're here. Right. So our panel was discussing how do telco and vendor ecosystems work together. Because there's many different types of ecosystem, and there's that a telco uses, and that developers have. That technology vendors have, depending on size, depending on focus. So we actually had a really interesting mix of panelists to basically open the work stream. So we had Greg from T-Mobile Poland, and they've been very effective in using a group of local Polish system integrators and third parties to basically provide outsourced development. And it's been very successful for them. And they work collaboratively through that ecosystem with the other operators in the region. Now that, for me, for some of the things that Asiata said is we need to work together as telcos. I think that provides a great case study within a limited focus around the open cloud platform, but again, it explained how the success they're achieving. And we compared and contrast that to what Venora's been doing in the Sri Lankan market, because they've been very effective in engaging third parties to the general long tail developers, which, to be frank, most developed markets have struggled with. But also, Venora uses that WSO2 platform that they're open sourcing, so any operator can take advantage of it, any developer can, or technology provider, sorry, can include it within their portfolio. They use that for engaging with what they call sort of trusted partners. So they have a very similar model, maybe not as established, maybe not as broad a community within Sri Lanka as we saw in Poland, but there was actually some synergy there. So telcos can have developer communities, but it's more focused on delivering services that they will be selling that are branded. We then looked out beyond that to the aggregators and understanding their role and how that relates to the telcos and the APIs and services that they can provide. And I think Jen's made a very good point. In their business, it's all about B2B. It's delivering the messaging, voice, numbers to basically businesses that have a clear commercial need. And it generates big volumes. In a great case study, I think in a couple of years' time, we'll be comparing and contrasting Twilio versus Nexmo. Nexmo is a far younger company, but has seen far more rapid revenue growth, and I think this could be a watershed year when Nexmo exceeds Twilio's revenues. And they've had a B2B focus, focusing on delivering enterprise class messaging, voice, number provisioning services. So again, it was very interesting to see comparing the different sort of business focus, because that also overlaps what T-Mobile Poland does, because they deliver their APIs, their messaging, voice capabilities to business customers, but it tends to be within Poland and for enterprises where trust and established relationship matters. And let's not underestimate that. The whole enterprise market lives around that trust. It's not as fickle as we see in consumers. And then we also had both Huawei and Open Cloud on the panel, and looking at the role that the developer communities play in relation to what the telcos are doing. And Open Cloud provides a nice example where they're very much about fostering a community of developers that can easily use the tools, that have all the documentation, that can efficiently, cheaply build applications for telcos. And Greg from T-Mobile Poland made a very good point that when they were building iron applications 5 years ago, the cost of actually building it was like 80% of the overall project. By basically moving to this third-party approach, it's now only 25%. So they've been able to reduce the costs of development by over 2/3. It's a great case study. And then when we were looking with Huawei, it was very interesting because they're building a global service innovation ecosystem. And they're looking at a whole range of different application areas. And one of the things that came out in the discussion that I think shows that as an industry, our thinking is finally moving compared to sort of on a year-on-year basis. It's still not moving fast enough, but we are seeing that sort of shift. Is if we were having a discussion maybe 1 or 2 years ago, the focus would be very much around APIs and what they can expose. We've seen that shift, and there's far more around what are the services that we can enable. And the key is, and I think this is where, and this is the challenge that we face as an industry, is once you get your head around, well, we've got these enablers, yes, that's all commoditized, the money ain't there, the money's in the services, and you're starting to create compelling services that have value, is you need to be able to sell it. It's that go-to-market chasm that we have as an industry. Because what we're seeing is sort of telco looks, well, I've provided the enablers, and I've got the local market presence, and I've got my technology provider, and they've educated the developers, and we sort of all work together, and we created this great application, or this great service, could be e-health, but who does the selling? Oh, we'll get a partner to do that. Well, to be honest, the partner then is going to sell it and take all the value. So telcos and the technology providers, I think, have to solve this problem. And this ecosystem, the people here, we need to solve this problem. This is a classic enterprise issue. And when you're selling services, you need domain knowledge. If you're selling to banks, you need banking domain knowledge. If you're selling to healthcare, to hospitals, you need hospital domain knowledge. Now, I'll be fair, I mean, NTT in their global services integration division, they've now, I think, bigger than Capgemini. I mean, they go head-to-head with Accenture in many deals. So telcos are and have been successful. BT has been very successful in financial services and security in several verticals, same with Orange. But I think when we start looking at some of the other verticals, that go-to-market gap needs to be addressed. How we address it, I think that's where we got as far as in the Workstream discussion, and that's, if you like, the next bridge that we need to cross. And it, I think, aligns very closely with some of the issues that you were facing. So we took more of an outside-in approach rather than inside-out approach, Mac.
Yeah, I think there was one point.
Or you just need to...
One point I missed that I wanted to raise was when it comes to standardization. I think Jean from Telstax mentioned it this morning, that the standards, and again, business as usual, standards within telco, we have to standardize everything before we can launch anything. But it's actually implement first and then standardize. I think that was also a key message that came out of this, which is not exactly, doesn't mesh exactly with what you were saying, but certainly the other point, which is reiterated, that domain knowledge means you have to work with, when you go to market, you have to work with SIs potentially, or others who know how to work in banking, healthcare, government, etc., etc. So it's not simply using the marketing guys who know how to sell voice, minutes, and phones. You can't use that group to actually effectively be in charge of, as it were, monetizing service innovation. So that's also two things that I missed.
Yeah. So I think it was, overall, I think I found the work streams were a blessed relief from presentations. It gave us a chance to talk and just be human. But again, I found it was very useful, and we'll be summarizing all this. It's all going to be documented, summarized in the weblog, as well as, of course, we're recording these videos as well. So again, thanks to everybody who contributed to the work stream.